Irashaimase. Hello and welcome to Fitaurus Kitchen. I'm your host, Chef Fitaurus. It's time once again for Shoot 'em Up Saturday, and this week we have a special Shoot 'em Up Saturday for you, as it's my 200th episode of Shoot 'em Up Saturday. Well, what do we have on this special menu? The Battle at Kemble's Cascade, a board game take on Shoot 'em Ups. What kind of taste will it have? Let's get cooking and find out.
The legends speak of ancient alien secrets and potent minerals hiding deep inside the asteroid clusters of Kemble's Cascade. The year is 3868, and you, as an ace pilot, have been selected by the Federation Council of your empire to uncover the myths and bring back those ancient technologies. This will once and for all give you the glory that you so well deserve. In Kemble's Cascade from publisher Z-Man Games, players take on the roles of captains seeking to obtain the most glory by flying through the asteroid fields, destroying enemies, and taking on fearsome bosses. The game is for 2 to 5 players, and the first thing players will do is pick one of 5 different colored, uniquely designed ships to represent themselves. Once players have chosen their ship, they'll receive an accompanying captain board, then threat, energy, and 10 player markers in that color, a rotary cage, a random mission card, and a random power-up, and finally 2 sensor cards. Each player will also place a glory marker on the glory track. Then once you set up your shop and space itself, you're ready to play. For gameplay, the game is played over a series of rounds. The first thing players do at the beginning of the round is pick a sensor card, and then everyone simultaneously reveals their sensor cards. The player with the highest value will go first. Sometimes the sensor cards will also have special bonuses on them, like this one, which gives you an extra bolognium. Once player order has been determined, a player can choose between 2 actions, the battle action or the power down action. These are listed on your captain board, and the details are printed in the order you'll perform them for both battle and power down. When players select the battle action, they get 1 free move and 1 free fire. For movement, you can move your ship in any of the 8 directions around you, with some limitations. You cannot move into the space occupied by an indestructible asteroid, a black hole, or a player ship, for example. For the fire action, the player's goal is to shoot at an enemy and destroy them. Pew! Boom! There are restrictions though. The rotary cage I showed you earlier indicates which directions you can fire. You can go and fire in front, behind, to the left, or to the right, but in order to change directions, you need to spend energy to change which direction your ship is firing, though you can upgrade your rotary cage to shoot in any direction free of charge. For damage, the game uses a concept called threat. Basically think of it as bullets or missiles that have been fired toward your ship. The threat is calculated from all spaces adjacent to your ship, and for anything that will give you threat, it's indicated next to the life bar or in that corner on the card. In this case, we would receive 3 threat, as there are 3 threat icons surrounding our ship. To resolve the threat, we go back to our player board. Your threat is marked on your player board. Here we have 3 threat, and when you resolve it, you tick it down the notches all the way back down to 0, and then you move your energy the same number. There are ways to mitigate that using items such as shields, or you will eliminate your threat through every 1 space you move. If you happen to run out of energy, you'll die, so in a situation like this where we've lost some energy, we might want to power down. When you power down, you recover 2 energy, then you would resolve any threat you happen to still have on your ship, and then you have the ability to go shopping. When you go shopping, you spend any bolognium you've obtained from defeating enemies, other spaces on the board, or possibly global events, and then go to the shop to buy items. The shop is stocked with a bunch of awesome upgrades, including engines which give you additional moves, shields which will mitigate damage or threat, lasers which will allow you to fire multiple times, missiles for splash damage, and flamethrowers for heavy damage. You also have the ability to buy the power-ups, which can give you awesome one-time effects. After all players have taken their turn, we get to Kemble's Cascade's possibly most awesome feature, the scrolling stage. If any players happen to be on the bottom row, they'll be bumped up one row. Then we clear the cards from that row, and the entire stage scrolls down one row. We move the empty tray back to the top, and fill it with another row of space. And it's possible if you have a daredevil pilot at the front of the screen, as it were, that they'll immediately receive threat and take damage from enemies that are coming onto the board, like so. The game continues to progress with players taking their turns in this manner until you get to the point where you're filling the top row and you encounter a boss card. This means the end of the game is nigh and the final boss of the stage has finally appeared. In this case, the Thundergeist. So if you haven't already prepared the bosses, like the bosses are supposed to be random so you're not supposed to know who you're fighting, then you would go and set up the bosses a particular certain way. The next time you stroll the screen, the boss starts to appear. And the bosses are gigantic, multi-segmented enemies that are really a lot of fun to see come onto the stage, as they take up the entire top of the stage and have all these special abilities, defenses, and tons of health, but also tons of glory for you to achieve. The Thundergeist, for example, is multi-leveled. As you continue to go and play, he won't show up all at once. There'll actually be 2 turns before you actually see all of this particular enemy on the screen. Once the bosses appeared, if you're able to defeat all the segments of the boss and obtain all the glory, the game will be over, or the game also ends if you happen to scroll off the very last stage that's there. Once the end game has been triggered, each player will calculate any additional bonus points of glory that they've received, either from cards or unspent Bolonium, and the player with the most glory wins.
And there we have it. The battle at Kemble's Cascade served up for your enjoyment. So jumping into the minus flavors and the plus flavors. The big minus flavor for me personally happens to be the build quality of some of the components. The cards are a great example of that, where the sensor cards and the space cards in particular, the ones you use to build your scrolling space field, are of really low, cheap cardstock quality. So after a number of plays, they're going to start to show a lot of wear. Even mine haven't received many plays, but they already have that wear on them. And then there's the plastic trays for the scrolling space themselves. They're just cheap feeling, they don't really look well, and they barely function in the purpose that they're meant for. I am even thinking of going and trying to 3D print my own replacement of them, as these, no good. So moving on to something that's not really a minus flavor, but is more of a hope, is it's not really something that's missing from the game, it's just something I'd like to see. You have all those different player ships and captain boards that you can potentially get as a player. It would have been wonderful if they had asymmetric powers, basically different abilities for each different ship. It would have added another great layer to what I feel is already a really good game. Moving on to the plus flavors, I love the way that they implement a scrolling space. Even though I don't really like the components of it, the idea that you're moving on this scrolling background is really good, and there's just a really fun feeling to that. I also really like, even though some of the build components aren't very good, and even the molding on these is kind of cheap, I really like that they took the time to design individual ships for you to go and play as. And some of them are obviously inspired by certain ships from video games, others it's like just a really creative design. So I love the design of the ships themselves. That's always one of the things that I'm attracted to in any shoot 'em up, really. And then there's also the replayability that the game presents. You have all these cards that you're not always using all of them to go and build your space, and as you're playing, the cards are going to be shuffled in different, so each time you're going to go and get a different star fill that you're playing through, kind of like a procedural generation, if you will. Not only that, there are additional modules in the game itself that you don't have to play with, but you can. Ones that like provide special spots on the starfield itself, or that give you a tunnel section, so you actually have to go and like weave through the stages. And there's other suggested scenarios that they have also. So their replayability is definitely there. In the end, the Battle at Kemble's Cascade is a really good implementation of a shoot 'em up in a board game. It's one that if you're a fan of shoot 'em ups and you happen to like board gaming as well, I definitely recommend trying to seek out and at least give it a couple plays, as I feel it would go and be worth your time. It's definitely got a unique and great flavor. Alright, well, that just about wraps it up for this week's episode of Shoot 'em Up Saturday. I want to thank you so much for coming out and joining me this week, and for all the weeks in the past. 200 episodes. Wow. And I definitely hope you'll come back and join me next week.